Mr. President, I know we're all in confined time here, and I have a lot more to say than the time will allow, but I just listen to this and I wonder, why do people think that the American people are so dumb they don't understand supply and demand? You know, I think it's a couple of weeks ago, no one can ever accuse the Washington Post for being partial to conservatives or to Republicans, but they came out with an editorial and they said, why do members of Congress think that they can repeal the law of supply and demand? Now, you can say it all you want, but we got to have more supply. And ever since the 1995 veto of the bill that would allow us to go offshore to increase our supply, go to ANWR, go to oil shale, the Democrats have voted against increasing supply since that time. That was the middle 90s. And now we're paying for it. And I can remember coming to the floor of this Senate back then when President Clinton vetoed the bill that would allow us to increase our supply and saying that day is coming. We're going to be sorry that we did this. Well, I'm real proud that the other day that President Bush called for action by Congress in 4 areas. One was the Outer Continental Shelf, which we've been talking about, other ANWR, and America's oil shale. And I have, to give you an idea of the capacity that's here, this is called supply. We know where demand is. Everyone's demanding it, but this is the supply. So he called for it. Now, we could have all the supply in the world. If we don't have the refining capacity, we are not going to be able to use that. We had the Gas Price Act. I thought that was one that would offset any kind of objection to this, the idea that we should be refining in this country. It was using some of these closed military bases, along with EDA grants, to allow them to have refineries in America. Now, we don't have the refining capacity in America, and we need to have that. So we need to have the supply, and we need to have the capacity to refine it. Polling, and I think the Democrats should be looking at this, is not where it used to be. The recent polling data from Rasmussen show that 67% of the voters support offshore drilling. Only 18% oppose it. The same poll also found that 64% believe if offshore drilling is allowed, gas prices will go down. And they will. You know, we've already shown, there have been several editorials which we've made a part of the record that have shown that the market responds when things like this happen. If we open up capacity, the market will respond. Another poll found that 81% of Americans support greater use of domestic energy resources by a margin of more than 4 to 1. Americans surveyed supported the U.S. tapping its own domestic energy reserves. You know, we're the only country in the world that doesn't tap our own reserves. Offshore, you know, I listened to the arguments there, which were really kind of ludicrous. When you stop and realize that offshore we have the capacity of getting in 14 billion new barrels, and people come down and said, I heard the Assistant Majority Leader say just a few minutes ago, he said, why, there's 68 million acres out there that are not being explored, not being produced, not being drilled at this time. Well, there's a very good reason for that, because there's no oil on them. Oil isn't everywhere, but where you know it is, you need to go after it. And so 85% of the land where there's an opportunity to bring oil in, the Democrats won't let us explore it. And it's something that I think the American people understand very clearly. ANWR is another area, and it contains 10 billion barrels that would be there. Back at the time that President Clinton vetoed the bill, that would be coming through the pipeline today in resolving these problems that we have. Rocky Mountain oil shale, that's the big one. That's the one that has 2 trillion barrels. Right now, they're operating under, they can't go after them. They can't continue technology. They can't explore for that. They can't produce it because the Democrats have a moratorium. And yet, if you go to the states where this is located, Colorado, Utah, the western states, they all want to do it. It'd be great for the economy. It'd be great for America. And it wouldn't take any time at all to get this done. The imports, by opening the nation's access to reserves in the Outer Continental Shelf in ANWR and oil shale, would cut our nation's trade deficit nearly in half. You've been watching recently T. Boone Pickens talking about, and we should listen very carefully to him. He talks about some things you can do with wind energy, but he wants to also to use natural gas, and that's an immediate partial solution to a problem. I have a bill that would allow natural gas, compressed natural gas, to be fully utilized, and right now there are some obstacles with the EPA and others that if we can pass this bill, I agree with Boone Pickens, we'll be able to utilize that, but as he says, we need to continue to produce, continue to explore, because you can't run the greatest machine in the history of mankind on wind power and solar power right now. We all hope that day comes, but it's not here right now. So right now we could cut our trade deficit nearly in half. According to the Energy Information Administration, the United States spent more than $327 billion to import oil in 2007. That's roughly half of the $711 billion trade deficit we had last year. So not only will we get cheaper gas for Americans at the pump merely by increasing the capacity, increasing the supply that's out there, but we'd also would do some great things in terms of our trade deficit situation that is there now. So, I would just say that why should producing America's own resources be a partisan issue? It shouldn't. But the Democrats in Congress refuse to increase the supply of energy, and the gas prices keep rising up. We've seen recently that all we have to do is open that up, and the markets will immediately respond, and I feel that this is going to happen. I can't imagine that the polling is going to get much more favorable than it is today. There's one state, I won't mention which state it is because it's considered to be pretty much a liberal state, that 3 years ago, only 28% of the people in that state wanted to drill offshore and ANWR. Today, it's 68%. Well, it doesn't get much better than that. And I'd suggest to you that we, Mr. President, we get the Democrats to join us, increase the supply, and resolve the problem, the energy crisis that we have right now, and the problem that is the number one problem in America. Talk to my wife, talk to anyone in any state, they'll tell you the one problem in America is the price of oil, gasoline at the pumps. We can solve it with greater supply. I yield the floor.